does it happen? She happened to find herself. And I love that because we know that that's God, right? And I think that when we are faithful to step into the new seasons that God has for us, and we choose to put our hands to something, which means we're invested in this new season. I'm going to give you something to work with, God, that He can go behind the scenes and put together the things that we can't. Welcome back to the Before Midnight podcast. We're back for season 3. This is so exciting. And the Before Midnight podcast is now 1 year old.
Yes. Oh my
Isn't
goodness.
that crazy?
It is so crazy. Wasn't it November or September 6th?
It was September 6th. Yes, 2023. And I don't know about you. Does it feel fast or slow?
Like how long it's gone?
Yeah.
Well, I feel like a lot has happened since then. So in that way, it feels like it's been a while, but it's definitely moving faster. Like the fact that we're already in September this year is so crazy to me. It's going faster every single year.
It is. It's definitely going fast. But then when I think back to us filming those first 2 episodes, that feels like longer than a year ago to me.
Isn't it funny that like we're on our 3rd different set now?
Yeah.
It's like this is our 3rd format.
30. That is true. Yeah. It has gone through seasons.
We've gone through many seasons. And
speaking of, if you've watched the show, you'll notice it looks a little different once again, and that's because we're filming from 2 different states, Colorado and California. Woo!
2 different time zones even.
2 different time zones. Crazy. Yeah. So Jeff and I moved to California last month, and it's been interesting. So... But I'm really excited because I think this is going to be really cool. And even though it was in the 80s today, which was actually cool for here, I have decided it's fall. So I'm decorating our little apartment for fall like crazy. So
yeah, this is probably the first fall sort of thing I've worn since September. And because I've just been holding on to summer so tight. I mean,
yeah,
I got the pumpkin spice coffees. I actually have one right now.
Good.
So I'm kind of moving into it slowly, but it's been hard for me to fully transition. And I think I have a couple days left of that.
So you do.
It's like September 22nd, right? Is like the beginning of September.
Technically. And there's a beauty to the early fall season. You know, I do think there's a beauty to that where it's like summer mixed with fall, where it's like the beginning of it. So it's like
we're in that right now. The trees are turning yellow. Just a little bit. Like all
I have my fake fall tree here. That's about as yellow as it gets.
I know which one you're talking about. I remember when you moved into your other house, I like put that somewhere. I don't even remember what happened, but we were like just putting stuff everywhere, and I put it in a really terrible spot just to see if you would notice. And I go back and it was moved. I'm like, okay, she noticed.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna notice those things. That's true. But speaking of new season. What better way to kick off season 3 than with an episode talking about new seasons? And I just thought this was an appropriate topic for obvious reasons. You know, we're obviously in a really new season. Mm-hmm. You've experienced a new season with getting, there was one time when you got married, moved states, and changed jobs all in like one new season.
That was crazy. Yes. And honestly, like, you're kind of in a newer season than me for sure, because you moved to a different state, new jobs and everything like that. But when I was thinking about this episode and I was preparing for it, I was like, this feels like a change of seasons for me and Brian too.
Yeah.
New jobs too. You guys leaving. I mean, that's a transition for us for sure. And, just even like today with this podcast setup, this is new. This is like a different way that it's looked since last year. So there's quite a few things going on that's different for both of us.
Yeah, it's true. And that's the thing is new seasons happen to all of us. And sorry, I think there's some first responders going down the road for me. I now live in an apartment, so this is going to be interesting. But new seasons happen to all of us, right? And whether it's, new job, getting married, moving states, having kids, going to college, leaving college, like there's all kinds of new seasons. And sometimes there's like a high when it comes to a new season, but then the change can be so overwhelming that sometimes it gets discouraging. And then we start to lose kind of that excitement. And new seasons can be hard. They can be hard, but that doesn't mean they're not good. And so they're also just a part of life, right? Like how
Yeah.
horrible would life be if you never went through a new season? Just like fall, like we're getting excited for fall and the holiday season and everything. But what if everything was like California where nothing changed? But no, it's going to be really good. I've got lots of plans. But what if life was that way, right? Like what if nothing ever changed? And so just thought it would be good to kind of talk about those new seasons and how to actually go through them the right way and go through them in strength, where we don't kind of fall for a lot of the deceptions that can come when we are tired and exhausted or uncomfortable or just not familiar with where we're at or what we're doing.
Yeah, for sure. And over the last maybe month or so, when I feel like there's been a lot of transitions, some of the ones I just mentioned, I've noticed that, if I'm starting to feel discouraged or if I'm just starting to feel like anxious because it's so much is different, I'll start to be really hard on myself. And then that almost makes it worse. I'm like, oh no, like, why am I feeling more anxious right now? Why am I like, why is stuff seem so different mentally? And just like, I start to feel hard on myself. And I notice that I feel like that just makes things more difficult than if I were to realize, okay, this is a new season right now and this is normal. Like my body knows that I'm in a new season, even like, physiologically and all this stuff. Like your body can tell. When I first moved out to Colorado, I was like driving up the hill somewhere to go to a party and I started to just feel so like panicky that Brian had to turn around. And I had never felt like that before. And I went home and I was like, why did I just feel like panic? And I looked it up and it said like in the midst of big life changes, we can feel that way. And sometimes we think that our body won't notice that stuff is changing or we shouldn't feel any different. And so all that to say, I think one important thing when you're going through a life change is just being able to give yourself grace. Because a lot of times we expect ourselves to just keep functioning like a robot and being like, oh no, this is fine, I'm going to be fine. And we just expect ourselves not to be sad about what we've lost or anything. But the thing is, it's like even in new seasons when stuff is exciting because it, like you mentioned, a new job or maybe your family is growing, moving to somewhere that you've always wanted to move to, it's exciting and it's a good thing. But at the same time, there's still something that you're losing when you leave. It's like I'm losing my familiar lifestyle and stuff. So realizing it's okay to feel this way because I am losing something, but I'm also gaining and growing,
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I remember when we were on a trip in Europe not long ago, this past summer, it's like, it's so exciting, right? Like, who doesn't love traveling Europe? And you love it, and you get to experience all these new things, and there's so much excitement. But then after a while, as the days turn into weeks and you're going from hotel to hotel to hotel, pretty soon I noticed that a lot of the excitement is still there, but things like, oh, my body's not getting the kind of food I'm used to. And like everything, when everything is so different, and especially if you're in a place where like the language is completely different and it takes effort to kind of like get around and figure things out, and you're not familiar with where you are and you have to find directions everywhere you go. It's like there's like a fatigue that comes with that. And it's also going to take time for you to figure out the new grace that you have, because there's a new grace for a new season, right? So, and that's like kind of one of the points that I wanted to talk about. But why don't I just get into that? So one thing that I wanted to bring up is I was thinking about this topic of change, and obviously I'm kind of in the midst of a lot of change right now with a new state and a new job and just kind of new everything. And not a new husband though, that's the same. And
is this confirmed? Can we confirm this?
It's been confirmed. He's fine. You don't need to see him. Same cat as well. Um, but yeah, so anyway, a lot of change. And I was thinking about it because there's been a lot of temptations that come up with kind of just wanting to be like, kind of fall into that exhaustion or frustration of things being different. And I was thinking of the story of Ruth. And so I was reading through Ruth and I noticed a couple of things because Ruth is like, talk about a big life change, right? Like she gets married to this man and then he dies. And so she lives with her mother in law and goes to her land, back to her land and her people. So she's got a new people, new country, new family, new God, right? New everyone, new just everything in her life is different, right? And obviously her story is so good and it turns out so well. So I was really interested to see like, well, what did she do? How did she kind of embrace this new season? And as I got to reading it, I really felt like the book of Ruth was written to show us how to walk through new seasons well. So I really encourage you just to read the whole book of Ruth. It's 4 chapters. It's not very long, but there were a couple things that stood out to me that I wanted to share in this episode. And the first one is in Ruth 1, starting in verse 16. It says, "But Ruth replied, 'Don't ask me to leave you and turn back. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God.'" And then this part really stuck out to me. "Wherever you die, I will die, and there I will be buried." And I know it's a little morbid, but when I
Perfect for fall, right?
right, like when you see Christian productions and songs and stuff, they always quote like "wherever you go, I will go." Wherever they do all that, but they don't normally say like "where you die, I will die, and I will be buried there." It's like that's usually the part that gets left out.
I
But
have a luggage tag that says wherever you go, I will go. And then, yeah, it
oh,
just
how
ends there.
cute! Does it include the death part? Oh,
Definitely not.
okay.
Maybe in the
Well,
fine print.
I like how it's even the next verse. Verse 17 starts with "wherever you die, I will die." It's almost like the people who put in the verses were like, yeah, let's break this up so we can use verse 16 without showing that. But that stuck out to me this time as I was reading it because it's like, okay, wherever you die, I will die. That's someone who isn't looking back, right? And that's like the first point that stuck out to me. She's not trying this on for size to see how it fits, to see how it works. And then if it doesn't work out, I'll just go back. She's like, no, wherever you die, I will die and there will be buried there. She's fully invested in this next season. She's not looking to try it out and then go back if it doesn't work out. And I'm not saying that I think you have to like die wherever your next season is physically. Because, that's not the point. But I think a point that really stuck out to me is just the fact that she was not looking back. And I know for me, in this very real new season that I'm in, the temptation to look back, obviously I'm not going back, but the temptation to think it was better there or to compare what I have here with what I had there. And that's a totally normal thing. Maybe
Hmm.
you're kids and you're thinking about all the time that you no longer have for yourself. Maybe you're married and you're thinking about how much better it was when you were just dating versus when you're married and you fight more or something. I don't know. Or maybe, this new job has been your dream job, but now you're thinking about all the ways that your old job that you used to hate, now all of a sudden you see all the good parts about it,
Hmm.
right? And this happens, and it's the enemy, and it's a temptation, and it's normal, but it is something I think that's really important to take a hold of when you're in a new season. Because if you allow those thoughts to linger and you start meditating on that, it's going to cause a lot of um, just like frustration and sadness and loneliness and all kinds of negative emotions that are completely unnecessary when you're in your new season. And so that
Yeah.
that really stuck out to me because I feel like I can definitely be tempted with those thoughts in any season.
I'm 100%. Yeah. There's a verse that I saw like maybe a year ago or a year and a half. And I would always describe myself as someone who's very sentimental. And so I feel like I'm more of a sentimental picture, let's think about the past person than I am like a visionary. Like,
Mhm.
oh, what's going to happen in the future? And like, let's move towards this goal. Like, I'm less like that. And I'm more about like, let's look at these photos of this time that I liked. So I can be
Yes.
so tempted with that. Like, I feel like I'm tempted with that every week. It's just like, like, oh, remember when I was living here, and remember when like Brian and I had just met. And it's like, I'm always kind of thinking about that. But the verse, I was trying to find it when you were talking, but I think it might be in Ecclesiastes. I don't know, but it's basically just saying like, don't, um, don't question why was the past better than now. That's not a good, like, that's the question is not wise. I think it says something like that. And I saw it, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, like the Bible even covers those sorts of feelings.
Hmm. Oh,
And
absolutely.
it's like, I think that's huge. And it just brings about a lot of dissatisfaction with the seasons that we're in. But I love that you said, like, in a new season, that's when it happens the most, like as a parent and stuff like that.
Hmm. Oh
But
my gosh, yeah.
yeah, but I feel like, when I was saying earlier, a lot of times in new seasons, we're losing something. But I feel like at the same time we're losing something, we're also learning so much. And it really applies to me right now in a new job that I have. And it's been challenging because there's a lot of new circumstances I find myself in, and just a lot of things that I've had to grow in and learn, because I feel like for me, I can get really comfortable with the familiarity, like you were saying earlier. Like, our bodies are so used to routine. And in this new job, there's a lot of things that I have to kind of go outside of my comfort zone. Um, and I've noticed that, even though this is uncomfortable because it's new for me, I am learning something every single day. Like, maybe it's very practical stuff, like, how to open a certain program or whatever, like I learned today when we're starting this podcast off. But in another sense, it's like you're growing and you're learning so much with character when you're in new seasons. And I was watching Joyce Myers the other night, and she started off her sermon, and she was basically asking the crowd, like, who of you feel closer to God, or you maybe not feel closer to God, but who of you to have depended on God more in a difficult season or like a new season versus when stuff looks the same. And every single person raised their hand. Like, and I look back in my life and I realize that is so true in my life. Like, the times when stuff has just been going really simple and easy, and my routine is the same like every week, I can still do my part to, try to be close to God and like read his word and continue to pray and everything. But it's in those seasons when I feel a little bit unstable. It's like, what's going to happen next because stuff is changing. That's when I feel like I just naturally more so am drawn to like, God, I need to hear your voice in this. And like, what are you trying to show me? And so having these seasons, looking at them as a way to grow instead of just feeling like, oh, look at all the stuff I've lost. But God uses these times in our life to really make us a more well-rounded person.
Oh, absolutely. No, that makes so much sense. And I mean, that's what they say with physical fitness too, right? Like
Yeah.
if you do the same thing over and over again, you'll reach a plateau where your
Mm.
body's not changing anymore and you need to kind of mix it up sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's yeah, the same thing. It's not always easy, but I love that. It's like you're having to do new things. And that really shows the next point I had in Ruth, and that's just the other thing that I saw was in Ruth 2:2, it says, one day Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go out into the harvest fields to pick up the stalks of grain left behind by anyone who was kind enough to let me do it. And as we know, that's where she met Boaz. But when I read that, it's kind of like what you were saying. She was busy doing what was in her new season. And when I saw that, I felt like that was the other kind of side of her success was not only did she choose to follow Naomi and choose not to look back, right? I'm not going back. I'm going to my new season. Part of being in that new season was actually putting her hands to something
Mm.
in this new season. And I think a lot of times another temptation that I think comes up is we go to the new season, maybe we don't look back or maybe we do, but we're in this new season and then there's a temptation to just be like, all right, well, if God wants me here, then he'll make things happen, and we wait for God to do something with us. We expect him to kind of make things happen. And what I see again in this chapter is if Ruth hadn't have gone out, and she's the one, Naomi didn't ask her to do this. She asked Naomi if she could do it. And if she hadn't have done that, she may never have met Boaz and may have never had this story happen with her. And so I just think that there's another temptation to kind of, I think there's a lot of reasons why this can happen. I think sometimes it's a lack of understanding of how God works, but also it could be fear. It could be fear that if I try in this new season, I'm going to fail. You know, like you said, it's uncomfortable, it's new. I might not feel like I know how to do things as well as I did in my old season, but I think there's a lot of things that can hold us back. But when Ruth took that step to go put her hands to something, right? Like just something. It wasn't, she didn't meet Boaz right then, right? She didn't make that happen, but she put her hands to something. She gave God something to work with. And then in the very next verse, in verse 3, it says, so Ruth went out to gather grain behind the harvesters, and as it happened, she found herself working in a field that belonged to Boaz. And I love how this translation puts that, as it happened, she happened to find herself. And I love that because we know that that's God, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when we are faithful to step into the new seasons that God has for us, and we choose to put our hands to something, which means we're invested in this new season. I'm going to give you something to work with, God, that he can go behind the scenes and put together the things that we can't. And the supernatural encounters, the connections, the meetups, the things that we can't make happen, he makes that happen. But I feel like he needs us in motion, right? He needs us invested. He needs us putting our hands to things. And then obviously the rest of the story is amazing. But those things stuck out to me, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like reminds me of that verse, you know, the faith without works is dead. I think it is really tempting to be like, well, God brought me here. And then you just sit and wait. And God's like, you know, no, like you need to go out. Like that means that sometimes you're going to have to put yourself outside of your comfort zone. But God takes care of us in that. Like he's not going to leave us alone and us just kind of like floundering. But it does require a certain level of action on our part when we're in a new season. But I was also thinking about, you know, another comfort in this in a new season is realizing that every single day we're in it, it's becoming more of the normal for us. Because sometimes like in the very beginning of a new job or you're a parent or something, and it's like, man, this feels so difficult and just crazy. Like I miss when stuff was more comfortable for me. But the thing is, every single day that you just show up and that you're faithful, it's becoming more familiar to you, and it's becoming more familiar to your body and your mind and your emotions and everything. And so that's like a comfort in that, because that's just day by day, right? Like just taking that day by day and knowing that every single day that you wake up and you're doing this over again, it's going to become easier and easier, you know? Like I'm sure any person in any job, like even for me, you know, I've been in a new job for I think since May, and even though there's still new stuff I'm doing week by week, it's like I feel a lot more comfortable just a few months later versus when I started this job, you know? But another thing, we were talking before we started, and I was like opening up my Bible to Deuteronomy, and Jessica's like, "Wait, why are you gonna be are you gonna be reading the laws out of Deuteronomy?"
Felicia's gonna read the curses to us.
But the reason I was going to Deuteronomy is because I was just thinking about a lot of times in new seasons, another way that it's really helped me get through it and just feel more safe in this new season is looking back and realizing how God has been so faithful to me. Because I feel like we may mention this earlier, but when I moved out to Colorado, that was probably my first big change. Like I had other changes, but that was probably the biggest: marrying, moving out, and a new job. And that was so new. And I look back and I'm like, well, God took care of me, you know, like the job ended up bringing me into new seasons at work that fit me more like he's bringing me into something that's more comfortable for me every single month, every single year, you know? And so just remembering how God's been faithful to you and how he's helped you along the way and he's stuck by your side when you're trying to go through something new. Just remembering that. And there's a verse, Deuteronomy 5:15, and in that verse it says, "Remember that you were once slaves in Egypt, but the Lord your God brought you out with his strong hand and powerful arm. That is why the Lord your God has commanded you to rest on the Sabbath day." The last part is not applicable to my point, but the first part, and God's just telling his people always to remember, and like, of course, we don't want to dwell on the past like we were talking about before, but it does help our faith and it does help us rest on God when we do look back and go, okay, I was in this season before and God brought me out of it, and just keeping that in the back of your mind whenever you're feeling like, is stuff going to go right? Like what's going to happen next?
No, yeah, that's really good. I know we've talked about this before on the podcast about building a history with God and just having that history of stepping out in faith and then seeing him come through for you. And that's why it's important to take those steps of faith when he's calling you to, but then also to remember them. And I think that's why journaling is so important. That's something that I've really felt led to do more than this season. And because it's so easy to forget, and then we look back and go, oh no, what am I going to do? And it's like, well, wait, like what David said, I killed the lion and the bear. What is this Philistine, And, but you have to remember those victories for them to build a trust in God. And, so that's
exactly.
Really good.
And another thing that I was thinking too is something that I've been learning and growing in this kind of newer season for me and Brian is realizing that there's a lot of instability in life, like there's a lot of things that change. Your job is going to change. Your family is going to grow. Where you live might not be the same forever. And there's a lot of instability. And I think that that's, for most people, I feel like that's hard. There's some outliers that just love like just doing a new thing every day.
Yeah, I don't get that.
No, I don't get that at all. Most people like their familiarity and having a routine to a certain extent. But what I've been really learning in this last few seasons and for quite a while, honestly, is this is such a good, precious time to realize that the only real stability in life is God. And when you think that way, it takes the pressure off of maybe people in your life to be the thing that keeps you stable. And it takes the pressure off yourself to always be searching for that thing that's going to either bring fulfillment or just bring you comfort. Because I love comfort and I like finding things that are like, oh, this brings me comfort, even like this food brings me comfort, whatever. But just realizing at the end of the day, God is always going to be there. He's always going to be stable. Like he is never going to change. The way he thinks about you is never going to change. His grace is never going to change. So when the outside stuff in your world is feeling like a little crazy and chaotic, you can always depend on God to be there with the same voice, with the same heart towards you and everything.
So in this really new season, there are a couple of things that I felt like God showed me to kind of help with this new season, and especially to help once you're in the new season, right? Because I know we've done episodes in the past on, how to hear the voice of God, how to know where he's leading me, what, when I'm not sure what to do. And those are important things to figure out before you go into this new season. So that's not what I'm talking about at all. But once you're in the new season and you're where you're supposed to be, then there are some things that I think can help. Obviously, the things that I talked about in Ruth, not looking back, obviously remembering, like you said, remembering God's faithfulness, remembering good times, but not dwelling on how much better it was or comparison and things like that. And then also getting busy in your new season, right? Put your hands to something, be invested in it. But also a couple things that I felt like God was showing me to help me in this time. It's very much my reality right now. One is to reevaluate priorities. And I think this is probably really obvious in a new season where, say, you're getting married or even having kids. I hear it all the time from people who have kids about how sleep is different, your time is different. And the thing is, that's okay because your priorities are now different in this new season, right? And so even with me, just kind of looking at this new season, I was really stressed out about a couch because we left our old couch at our old house because it was giant and it would not fit in this little apartment, and it fit the house perfectly. So we left it. And but we were trying to figure out a couch to get, and I was like, oh well, but how many people can fit on it? And I'm like, oh, but what if we have people over? Because before at our house, hosting was a big part of what we did. We hosted our friends all the time. We had people over all the time. I mean, the amount of people we had over and also went over to people's houses for dinner before we moved was crazy. And that's because we just had a huge community around us. And so we were always hosting. That was a really, really big deal to me. And then I kind of had to realize that in this season, that's not really going to be this season. Not saying we're not going to have anybody over or anything like that, but we're probably not going to be hosting, 12 people once a month for parties and stuff, at least not right now. It's a different season that we're in. And so we ended up getting a couch that doesn't seat as many people. But it reclines on both sides, and it's got the middle part can go down and it becomes like a flat surface, and we can put like our food there. You can put things there. It's got phone chargers.
It's got cup holders. I was about to say, I saw the cup holders.
It is. I'll maybe show a picture, but you can check my Instagram. But yeah, it's a pretty cool couch. But the priority of that couch is me and Jeff watching movies, basically. Mm-hmm. And so, because that's kind of the season we're in, we're working a lot. We want to relax, and we're not going to be hosting a ton, even though it can still hold people. So don't worry if you're coming over. But I kind of had to there could have been a lot of frustration there with picking at something like a couch. But when I reshifted my priorities and thought, okay, God, that was my old season. What do you have for me in this season? What should I prioritize? If we ask ourselves that, then it will really help take off a lot of the frustrations of us trying to live in a past season when this is a new season and there might be new priorities. So that was one thing that I felt like God really wanted me to see. And then the other thing is very similar to what you were just saying about finding things you love, is to celebrate the small things. And that's, again, something that I felt like God was showing me. Fall is my favorite season. Here in Southern California, there's not a lot of weather change this time of year. But I love fall. And so what I'm doing is decorating my apartment for fall, and I'm getting the fall coffee drinks that I love. A lot of them are more iced now in the 90-degree heat than hot, but that's okay. I'm like, wow, I didn't know I could get all these as iced coffees.
That was my life in South Florida. That was my life.
That's true.
There was no season change, and there was no hot coffee days.
Exactly. So I'm and honestly, it's really helping. And watching my fall movie list, decorating, and then also finding things out here. There's a lot of really cool pumpkin patches out here and cool things for fall. And so finding those small things that you love that are kind of like a part of you, and then doing them in your new season, right? Just because you're in a new season doesn't mean you can't do those things. And sometimes we get so busy trying to unpack or trying to figure out our new season, figure out our new life, that we forget to stop and celebrate the small things or enjoy the small things. And that can bring a lot of joy into this new season. And now what you're doing is you're making memories in this new season. If it's kids, start doing things with your kids that you've always wanted to do and make memories with them, or, celebrate with them. Or if it's marriage, find things to do together. Like if it's a new job, find ways to celebrate with the people that are in your life there. There's all kinds of ways to celebrate in those small ways. And I think when we do that, it just brings so much more joy and peace into our new season, because we feel less like we're missing out, if that makes sense. Yeah. And finding little things to do, I think, really helps.
For sure. I love what you said. And then the first thing that you said, though, hit really hard, because I think about a month ago, it was in August. Yeah. I came to this place where there was just so many things that I felt like were changing, or some ways that I was having to come outside of my comfort zone. And I just I remember my parents were with me, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do all of this. And I just was sitting in the car, and I just kind of started cutting away at stuff that I was like, I just need to start saying no to certain things in this new season, because with all the stuff changing, I wanted life to look exactly the same. And I wanted
Yeah.
to be able to have the same capacity that I did before. And I'm like, I just can't. Like, there's too much that's coming up that I'm trying to focus on. Like, work has definitely been busier for Brian and for me. And so, even stuff like, we used to get home about the same time every day after work. It was like, because we both could just leave when we felt like the day was done. But, like even Brian on Friday, he was at work until 6:30 and he had gotten there at like 7. I don't even know, like 7:30. So it was a long day, and I could get frustrated with that and be like, oh, well, we're supposed to eat dinner at this time and we're supposed to like be eating in this much versus eating out or whatever. But in the midst of a new season, it's important, like you said, to realize stuff is maybe going to look a little different. Like the way I do things, maybe we'll have to eat out a little bit more and like have stuff like that that's we're
You
not
might
maybe
have to have
used to.
Chick-fil-A a little bit
Exactly.
more. It's gonna be
I mean, it's
okay.
gonna be a challenge. Such your trial. You have to eat more Chick-fil-A.
No, but
But it's so
that's such a
true.
good point. Like
Yeah.
literally the same thing with us too. Like a very similar thing where what you're saying is like comparing, your season with what you think it's supposed to be or maybe
Yeah.
what other people go through. Cause like
Hmm.
I know a big trend right now everywhere is like girls who make all these homemade meals and homemade
Yes.
bread and homemade milk and I don't know, like everything, right? And that's awesome and it's really, really great. But there's like this feeling that I need to be doing that. If I'm a woman, if I'm feminine, if I'm a good wife, I need to be doing that. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. But I felt like this pressure that I needed to do that. And then even moving here, we're in an apartment and we're working a lot. We're kind of on the move and um, we're traveling a lot. And I kind of had to realize, like, exact same thing. We might be eating out more. We might, and this sounds like a great thing, right? But it's actually kind of weird when your brain
It is.
is used to, like, oh, grocery shopping and meals and
Because
planning.
we can
And
be really hard on ourselves. Like
we can
that's one
be
of the main
so hard
things.
on ourselves.
And
Yeah.
comparison is so huge, like you said. I was thinking the same thing when we're comparing ourselves, but also trying to adjust to the new schedule, then it becomes really a lot more difficult because then we're like, well, this person's able to do this and that, and they're able to cook at home and they're able to work these hours. It's like comparison kills our ability to just find peace in new seasons sometimes.
It's so true. You will never find peace in your new season by comparing it to someone else's season because they're always in a different season.
Hmm.
Even if it looks similar to what you're in, there's other things going on in their life behind the scenes that are not going on for you and vice versa. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, no, that is such a good point to stop the comparison and just be like, okay, what season am I in? And then don't let people make you feel bad. Like people love to make you feel bad, but I think they do it just because like they feel bad. Like maybe they feel like they're supposed to be doing something and by
Hmm.
you doing it it makes them feel bad. So they try to be like, "Oh, well you should be cooking for your husband more or you should be spending more time at home or you should be,
Hmm.
whatever the case may be." And then I'm sure when you have kids, it's even more. So, people love to explain to you how to do that. And so
Yes.
and so it's just, finding your season. You won't find peace until you are okay in your season and just be like,
Hmm.
God, show me what that looks like, and he'll show
Exactly.
you. He's so faithful to show us what we should prioritize and then what we should let go of. Like you said, maybe there's things to let go of. Well, thank you so much for tuning into the podcast for season 3. We are so excited. We have lots of amazing fall holiday episodes coming your way. We are not slowing down, so be sure and subscribe so you can catch everything that we have coming your way.
And if you didn't know, we're also on Instagram and Facebook, so make sure to check us out on there. And until next week, remember
To have courage.
and be kind.